I'm feeling a little bit gaslit right now. Girl, we knew. And unfortunately, we lived through it with you, so the revisionist history is not going to work. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am so excited to have you all back here with me again this week for another great video. If you're new here and this is the first time you are seeing my face, welcome. My name is Sam and I make weekly videos dissecting internet nonsense, so if you're into that type of thing or you like today's video, I hope that you'll consider liking and subscribing. It really helps out the channel and make sure you never miss another upload from me. Now, I feel like I haven't done this in a little while, and that is talk about things that are happening in my life. Today, I feel like I need to do that, not as an apology, but rather an explanation of wearing my hair in a ponytail for 2 videos in a row. I have not traditionally done that unless I'm not feeling well mentally, or like physically, right? So I wanted to make sure that those of you who have been here for a long time and might know that I am a-okay. I'm just exhausted. It's been a long week. We've got all the politics happening. TikTok was banned for all of like 6 hours. And then also I spent the last 48 hours with 10 foreign exchange students from high schools all over the world who live in my district. And we hung out and had a great time. We introduced them to each other, to our community. We did a lot of fun activities. They got to talk to each other. It was so much fun. But entertaining high school kids for 48 hours has been very challenging. So I'm just exhausted and could not be bothered to wash my hair. But you know what I could be bothered to do? Put that bad boy up, pop on this sweater, turn on this camera and these lights to talk to you all about the nonsense that is happening with Anna over at Glitter and Lasers. She has really been at it this week with the lying, the misinformation, and proving herself to be a medical mystery as a part of her new podcast called Medical Detectives. Now, in case you don't know who Anna is, or because we haven't talked about her on the channel in a while, if you need a little refresher, let me introduce you to her. Anna is a self-described confidence queen who does not care about her haters, except when she responds to them to tell them to unfollow her.
So if you don't like what I'm eating, don't follow me. If you don't like what I'm wearing, don't follow me. If you don't like what I've linked to or how I've linked to or what method I've used to link it, don't follow me. If you don't like me pursuing my health, don't follow me. If you think I'm too fat, don't follow me. If you think I'm too thin, don't follow me. If you think I exercise too much, don't follow me. If you think I do my exercises wrong, don't follow me. If you think that I should be doing more exercises, don't follow me. If you think I should be doing less exercises, don't follow me. If you think that I should wear bigger clothing, don't follow me. If you think I should be wearing smaller clothing, don't follow me. If you just don't like what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, don't follow me.
She's also known for her toxic positivity and absolutely unhinged behavior on her channel, where she does things such as undressing and redressing a Target mannequin, yelling at a woman for complimenting her on a public walking trail.
I am so petty, but in the most delightful way ever. You can be nice and a bad bitch.
And just acting a fool in public places for attention. Over the last year, Anna has worked really hard to rebrand her social media and add in elements about her health journey, including her recent diagnosis with lipedema. As she's done this, she's introduced her audience to various doctors, as she's gone in to get things like liposuction surgeries and other experimental treatments such as sitting in a high-altitude pod. This is one that she promoted on her channel to her large following without acknowledging that it was a prototype and that she was working with a research scientist. See, she's loads of fun to follow because she's entertaining, bright, energetic, and most importantly, a complete messy disaster, and we love that for her. As I mentioned, most recently, what she's been up to is promoting a new podcast where she is a co-host, and they are going to solve medical mysteries by being medical detectives.
I've been really open about my health journey, and it has been a struggle navigating the healthcare system and finding the care I needed. Because of this, I've really felt like there's just a need to do more.
It's something that a lot of people struggle with and just don't even know where to begin. So about 6 months ago, I was introduced to Dr. Nance.
She's this super badass orthopedic surgeon in New York who raises awareness for diseases that disproportionately affect women.
Out of that introduction came something I'm super excited to tell you about, the Medical Detectives podcast. Each week we're going to be diving into a story from someone just like you who has faced a challenging or difficult or sometimes even mind-boggling medical mystery. First episode of Medical Detectives, well, it's really special to me because it's actually my story. And it's parts of my story I've never shared before. I hope you'll join me and listen in on Wednesday, January 8th for our launch episode.
Anna's qualifications for this podcast are that she is a self-described medical mystery. And even though she has no medical background and also admitted that she does not know how to navigate the healthcare system at all, she's clearly going to be a vital piece of this podcast. Her host, however, is a doctor, Dr. Erin Nance, who she describes to us as an orthopedic surgeon who is interested in diseases that disproportionately affect women. I was surprised when I searched Dr. Erin Nance that I found on her own website that she's an orthopedic hand and upper extremity surgeon. Her specialties include elbow, hand, and wrist surgeries that treat conditions such as carpal tunnel, distal radius fractures, ganglion cysts, trigger fingers, basal joint arthritis, cubital tunnel syndrome, finger fractures, and wrist sprains. That's not exactly how Anna described her, so I found that to be a little interesting. But as I was Googling, trying to figure out if she was actually interested in things that were outside of her specialized field, what I found was that in October of 2023, she went viral for using her TikTok platform to point out the disproportionate misdiagnoses for women when it came to certain things such as heart attack and stroke. It's reported that within these videos, she was sharing brief overviews of different conditions before opening the floor for commenters to share their lived experiences being misdiagnosed. She even shared for this publication that she was inspired to create this series on her TikTok after talking with a woman who fought through pain for 10 years to get a diagnosis. Could this have been Anna? And are the two of them trying to recreate these viral videos by Dr. Nance in the form of this podcast? Now that I had a very basic understanding, because I know who Anna is, I've done a basic search of Dr. Nance, all that was left for me to do was to listen to the podcast itself. And listen I did. This whole first podcast episode is all about Anna telling her story from her point of view. It's very interesting, as you're going to see, because she's trying to lay out why she's important to this podcast, right? She's trying to lay out her case for being a medical mystery herself. This episode is an hour and 15 minutes long, so we're not going to go through this line by line. That would take way too long, and I'm not trying to keep you here all day. Again, I already know that I yap too much. What we are going to do instead is go through what I thought were highlights from this episode. Let's get into it. First, and I'm going to admit right up front that I know that this is me being nitpicky, which is why I'm putting it first. I think it's the least important thing about the podcast, but it did bother me. The scripting, just like when Anna was on Novo Nordisk's podcast, is so clunky. It's so obvious that they've scripted this entire thing. It killed any chemistry they might have had, but also really made the episode feel segmented. Anna's talking in her own world, and then Dr. Nance is talking in her own world, and then they just pieced those two together. And that's how this entire episode feels. There were even bits in this podcast that were just edited really strangely. Like, you could hear Anna crying in her voice, and then mid-sentence there would be a hard cut. She would not be crying to state some sort of fact, and then it would cut immediately back to her finishing that sentence where she is again crying.
And I have been publicly pushing myself to make choices that I once perceived as bad because I think that I need to learn how to get over that shame because it's not healthy to carry that burden. Even knowing it's not my fault, I still feel like it is. There is a community of doctors who still do believe that obesity is the individual's fault. And it's not like 10% of our population is overweight. It's like 60% of our population. All these people are getting overweight. What is going on? Our genetics could be changing, our food could be changing, our environments could be changing, our socioeconomic situations could be changing. What is causing people to gain weight? So let's take the morality out of it completely. Like, let's take the choice out of it and say it's not a person's choice. So if it's not their choice, if nobody would choose this, we have to start looking at this as something that's actually a medical issue versus punishing people. I have gone at great lengths to share my medical journey, which at times I've really regretted.
I guess it could just be like first episode jitters, but for someone who's been on social media for such a long time and has a professional editor, I guess I just expected it to be a little bit more smooth than this. The first thing I highlighted was Dr. Nance's first question for Anna, which is, when did you start to notice at first that your body was different than everyone else's? And the reason that I highlighted this was not due to the question, but of course Anna's response, where she tells a story about how she started to mysteriously gain weight at 8 years old and no one knew why.
So the changes in my body really started to happen around puberty. I just started to gain weight, which was kind of unusual because I was always a really active kid. Like they used to call the church doors the Anna doors because I was running in and out of them all the time, causing trouble. And I used to do this dance where I would move my feet really fast because I just had so much energy. So it was puzzling to a lot of people, how was I gaining weight? And the first thing went to like, oh, she must be eating wrong, right?
Now, if you've been watching Anna for as long as I have as a Once Upon a Time fan, you know that in her book, A Life Full of Glitter, she has a story about when she was 6 years old and stealing food. In that story, she shares, at age 6, I remember sneaking into the kitchen and stealing some cookies to snack on before dinner. My father had told me several times that under no circumstances was I to have any of those sweet, chocolate morsel-filled biscuits before dinner. She goes on to describe the way she felt, her enthusiastic belief that she had pulled off the heist before she was caught by her father mere steps away from her bedroom. Anna's storytelling in this book and in the podcast offer so much insight and sort of a broader reveal of her long time, very troubled relationship with food, right? Because in the book, at age 6, she's stealing food and she's describing it so vividly. The sweet chocolate morsels, where she held them so that they melted, the way they looked as they rolled across the carpet. It's a core memory for her. These food memories are core memories. And to me, in my opinion, that reads like that was probably not the first time, nor the last time that she stole food. It might have just been the last time she got caught stealing food. But in her book, she never continues on to talk about that or the way in which food might have had a hold on her, why she needed to steal the cookies. She never gets that far into it. But then in this podcast, by age 8, she's inexplicably gaining weight. Now, in the podcast, if you hadn't read the book, you wouldn't know that at age 6, she started stealing food. So is it inexplicable? The other thing Anna didn't mention at all in this podcast that I thought was really interesting regarding her giving her history with food and weight and body image, she didn't mention her mom and her sister, who both passed away from complications with their weight. And we know that despite her not sharing it in the podcast, because Anna, very early in her internet career, shared a blog post about them. She titled the blog post Deathly Fat, and in it she explained why she couldn't support body positivity or any influencers that promoted their obesity as healthy, because she had seen personally that it was not. She describes that both her mom and her sister died as a result of complications from their health. She says, my mother passed away at age 52 in 2003. She had gotten sick and her body couldn't fight it. Her cause of death was listed as morbid obesity. She also shared that her sister died in 2011 as a result of long-term weight-related issues. She expressed that she believed their deaths were a result of their poor food, exercise, and general health choices. Now, those are incredibly heavy sentiments, but to me, they're important to include because it's a reminder that we all have different backgrounds and we all have different experiences, and for better or worse, those shape who we are today. So it was interesting to watch Anna leave those out as she was talking through her health journey that she's going through today, because these are important milestones, and of course they shaped what she's going through and who she is and how she's making decisions. But when you start to bring in these puzzle pieces that she's excluded, which we can do because she's left little pieces spread all over the internet for us, we can see that Anna is less a medical mystery and more just a normal person who started to struggle with their body image and their relationship to food very early in life. Her story, unfortunately, is not unique. This is the same story that we have heard over and over and over again from fat activists and fat liberationists and people who just generally live in this body positive space online. They all had mothers who struggled with their weight and put those struggles onto their daughters, leaving them with a lifetime of EDs and body image issues, ruining their relationship with food. And in every single story, they tend to start with being about 8 years old and being put on a diet or being taken to Weight Watchers. In fact, when Anna started her story saying that she was 8 years old, I like That's So Raven flashed back to Jordan Underwood saying he was 8 years old the first time a doctor told him he was fat, and then his mother, as a result of that, took him to his first Weight Watchers class. This is where I believe Anna started to stretch the truth, because rather than being put on some fad diet or starting a Weight Watchers class, her mom skipped directly to getting her a prescription for fen-phen.
So I remember around that time when I started to gain weight that my mom took me to this really shady doctor in the middle of nowhere. And I remember even as a little kid being like, this place is sketch. And went in, there was like one of those little windows that they pulled open, and I looked inside, and the woman asked me like 3 questions. Not one of them was my age or my weight or anything like that. It was literally like, do you have a heart murmur? Do you have any of these other conditions, diabetes, I think? And this is like at 8 years old. Shut the door, took me in. This older man gave me a speech about why I was awful because I was overweight. And then he wrote me a prescription for what I now know was fen-phen. So at 8 years old, I started taking fen-phen.
Now, I've been on the internet for a really long time, so you can call me a cynic. I get it. I'm cynical of everything. But I very highly doubt that this story is true in its entirety. I doubt that there was a doctor who asked an 8-year-old Anna about a heart murmur before lecturing her about being overweight and then lackadaisically prescribing her fen-phen. Fen-phen to an 8-year-old. I think Anna is doing 2 things here. First, I think she's trying to make her story more unique, but also more extreme than her peers, who again, all have a very similar story. The other thing I think she's doing is trying to maybe protect her family and their memory, because she, again, completely excluded that her mom and her sister struggled and passed away from weight-related issues. Now, when you add that element back into the story and you hear about fen-phen, it seems much more likely that maybe her mom and her sister had prescriptions for fen-phen, and maybe they were giving some to Anna. And again, this is just my opinion and speculation. The reason I think that could be a likelihood is that most mothers who have overweight children feel bad. Even Jordan Underwood talked about his mom feeling bad, and that's why she took him to Weight Watchers. We've heard Obese to Beast say his mom felt bad. It's not out of the range of possibilities that Anna's mom thought maybe this will solve her mystery weight gain. Maybe I'm to blame and I need to fix this. It doesn't mean it's right, but it does mean it could have happened, because Anna also tells us that her parents were kind of casual about the use of fen-phen in the household. And remember how we talked about in Anna's book how she never expounded upon her need to steal cookies or different foods? Well, in the podcast, she does explain a little bit further that her mom, after this happened, threw away all the foods that Anna thought was tasty, and they were only allowed to eat things like brown rice and chicken and vegetables. Then, after she tells us this, she once again goes into a very vivid telling of a memory she has surrounding food.
And I remember, and I have this very vivid memory of when I was about, I want to say 10 or 11. I went to my friend Nikki S's house, and her mom made me a cheeseburger. And I remember sitting there eating that cheeseburger being like, this is the best thing I've ever had in my entire life. This cheeseburger, wow. And this like a cheese, it wasn't even probably that good of a cheeseburger, but because I'd eaten such terrible food for like a while.
Like we're talking In-N-Out cheeseburger or
Yeah, like it was probably like McDonald's cheeseburger, but I just remember being like, oh my God. I was like, my life has forever changed. Like music played, lights flashed. Like it was like this amazing thing.
The way that she describes this memory of this cheeseburger, again, just alarm bells going off in my brain. There's something wrong here. You shouldn't have felt that way about food then. And the thing is, she's giddy about it now. The way she giggled when she was telling the story. The way she joked and talked about music and lights flashing. It's very telling, in my opinion. It's very, very telling about how she felt about food then, but also how she feels about food right now. Now, the next thing I highlighted, because I kept writing it down in my notes so many times throughout the podcast, is that Anna is really focused on the wrong thing throughout the entirety and even up to right now in her life, and that is her activity level. So when she starts her stories about her very early childhood when she was 8 years old and inexplicably gaining weight, the reason it was inexplicable is because she was so active. But by 11, she has an explanation, and that is the fen-phen, because it's zapped her of her energy, so now she's not being active, and that is causing the weight gain to happen more quickly. So the activity level is the only explanation for any weight gain she had in her early childhood. It's kind of telling to why she would leave out the stories about stealing food at 6 years old. When she moves into her stories about her young adult life, her sole focus is still on her activity levels. She says she lost 100 pounds by just being active, running to the gym, doing multiple cycling classes, walking to work. At some point, she says she did 4 miles one direction to either the gym or her office. I cannot remember. But that is a lot of activity. And again, she is solely focused on that. And then she says, when I started to gain weight again, I couldn't understand why, because my activity levels were so high.
As part of this Weight Watchers group, and I would go to Soul Cycle with these girls. I would run to Soul Cycle, do 1 to 2 Soul Cycle classes and run back. I started walking to work. So I would walk from Brooklyn to Midtown Manhattan, which is about a 4-mile walk. And I would walk there and back. And I started just becoming really, really active. But this was very different because I was gaining weight while still maintaining a really healthy lifestyle. So I was still going to spin class. I was still running. I was still eating healthy. I was still walking to and from work. So it didn't make sense that I was gaining weight back.
And I found this so interesting because this is who Anna still is to this day. When she announced a few years ago that her weight was causing her issues, the very first thing she did was start to talk about her activity. She started filming herself in the gym. She started taking sponsorships from gym companies and wearing athletic wear. She posted video after video of herself working out. She did a running series, and her mobility issues are what eventually pushed her into getting liposuction of her lipedema. She is so focused on how her body moves and her activity levels that nothing else matters. She is always focused on proving that she can be active, but she never ever talks about what she is eating or her food intake. And she mentions her eating a little bit here and there on the podcast, but never in a way that's meaningful. It's very similar to how she is on her channel, where she doesn't want to talk about it. And while I understand not wanting to talk about those things, the issue that she's created for herself is that when she's vlogging, she is often sharing tidbits of what she eats, and she's typically sitting in front of mountains of desserts, eating cotton candy on her way to get a bagel, or filling baskets full of highly processed snack foods. Then she gets really salty with the people who have the audacity to ask her about her diet, because she doesn't realize that she really needs to be all or nothing. She can't say she doesn't want to talk about it and that she's eating healthy, and then just continuously show junk food and highly processed food and desserts that she's eating in all of these vlogs day after day after day. I think it's kind of interesting that we can watch these videos and collectively draw these parallels, but Anna refuses to do any sort of self-reflection, right? She's not only lying to her audience, which is a problem for me because they're very vulnerable people, but she's also lying to herself. And I fear if she can't do that reflection and get some self-awareness, that she's never going to change and she's never going to see improvement. Another point of interest for me was Anna's alternate history to Bagelgate, because in the podcast, she tells her co-host that the internet was particularly cruel to her, knowing she had just gone through a major surgery and choosing to erase her whole surgery story to make fun of a fat girl eating a bagel.
So they pick this video up and they make so many videos about fat girl cries over bagel. And they turn it into a fat girl doesn't get what she wants, and so she cries. They erase the entire part about the fact that it had literally nothing to do with the bagel. So this turns into this whole thing where people are just talking about bagels vaguely around me, and I have no clue what's going on, right? And they knew I was in surgery. They knew that I was having this major surgery. And that's the thing they decided to go in on, is that I cried over a bagel. And I'm just like, y'all, I just had a major surgery. There was no compassion for me as a human being at all.
Now, I don't know about any of you, but I nearly laughed out loud in my office while I was listening to this, because we erased her pain and we erased her struggle and we made it about a fat girl eating a bagel. We did that. I'm feeling a little bit gaslit right now. Now, I went back and watched that video, and I have to say, the erasure that Anna is feeling is her own doing, okay? She didn't mention her surgery in that video, like in the beginning. She didn't talk about her pain scale. She didn't talk about incentivizing her walk that she was required to do to get the bagel. She didn't say any of that at the beginning. It's just very loud, upbeat jazz music as she talks about walking to get a bagel because she wanted one and her dog wanted one. This is Anna experiencing the negatives of her toxic positivity, in my opinion, because she is the person who chose to mask any pain that she was in to make that video. She is the one who hid her pain, didn't discuss her surgery, chose to film herself making a side quest where she stood in line for 30 plus minutes to wait for cotton candy. She chose to film herself jumping around and making fun of children. She chose to erase her own pain to make this over-the-top, nonsensical content. And I want to point out that also within this story, she said that the internet chose to bring up the bagel and to erase her pain because we knew that she was vulnerable in her recovery from a major surgery. Girl, no, we did not. She went out of her way to mask her actual surgery dates. I remember the timelines were so wonky as she kept posting pre-recorded videos at different intervals, at different timelines. Nobody knew when her surgeries were actually happening. There were people who were trying to piece them together, okay? I could not be bothered to do so, so I'm not going to try to lay that out for you today. But I do remember creators like Shakara Transformations, Tiny Blue Anthropologist, and Colin Mockery doing said work. Like, it was a whole thing. No one knew when the surgeries were happening. Anna chose to upload this video at a very unfortunate time for herself. And she did that knowing that this video would get the response that it got. So again, whose fault is that? Also, I really love that she is telling us once again how bothered she was by all of this when she went to such lengths when it was happening to prove she was unbothered. Like when she made the follow-up post with her little smug face as she ate a basket full of bagels in her apartment after the fact. I just cannot with this, and this is why Anna is so funny and nonsensical to me, because again, we have a situation where she was trying to prove she was unbothered. We all knew she was bothered, and now she's admitting it. Girl, we knew. And unfortunately, we lived through it with you, so the revisionist history is not going to work. There are two final pieces that I think are worth touching on since we're already talking about the podcast episode. The first is that Anna is continuing to be very vague about her diagnoses, and the only reason that that makes me absolutely crazy is because of this rebrand she's trying to do, where her whole social media has become about her health journey. She's done all of that and now started this podcast without doing an iota of research. She is sharing a ton of medical misinformation and just doing things that generally are not useful under the guise of wanting to do more and wanting to be helpful. As I listened to Anna talk, it became more and more and more obvious to me that she was taking the things these doctors were saying as an absolute truth. And the problem with that is Dr. Herbst could be really great as a doctor and a scientific researcher, but she's going to have a niche, right? So maybe she hasn't seen these two genes paired together. But that doesn't mean that literally no one else worldwide has seen these two genes interact together. It literally doesn't mean that there's not other scientific research. But in Anna's world, if the one doctor who has been helpful to her before says that it is, then that must be the truth. The very last piece of this thing for me is Dr. Nance. I wrote down so many times in my note, where is Dr. Nance? Why is Dr. Nance not talking? Anna just talked and talked and talked and talked in this podcast. And Dr. Nance has the shortest little snippets, just popping in here and there to explain apoptosis or what lipedema is, or that sometimes obesity has a stigma behind it. Things that we're well aware of. She never gets in depth, and she doesn't really add anything of value to this podcast, at least in this first episode. She really sticks to the basics, like she has a very limited understanding of these diseases, which I guess would make sense because she's a hand surgeon and not an obesity doctor or a lipedema specialist. I think the thing that I learned today that's most important is that Anna is a great revisionist historian. And I knew this going into it. She is a great storyteller, but for what it's worth, all her storytelling really revealed is that she's not a medical mystery. She's a human being with a long history of negative experiences related to food and her body image. She's got a complex family history where she had a mom and a sister who died from complications related to their weight. All of those things are molding and shaping who Anna is today, even if she doesn't want to see it. But the truth is, the only person she's fooling is herself. And I'll be honest, I watched the first and second episode of the podcast, listened to them rather, and I don't know who these are going to help, except for potentially Anna's pocketbook. All right, that is all I have for you all today. At this point, I am so curious to know what you think about all of this. Had you listened to Anna's podcast? Did you see the way that she was promoting it? Had you heard of Dr. Erin Nance before? What do you think about Anna continuing to pose as this sort of medical mystery? And what do you think about her setting herself up as some sort of medical detective to help other people in future podcast episodes? What do you think about the discrepancies in her story, specifically the story about being prescribed fen-phen at 8 years old? Did you flag the 8-year-old sort of consistent storyline between Anna and her fat activist peers? I am so genuinely curious to know what you think, so please share your opinions for me down in the comment section. You know I'll be reading them shortly after this video goes up. And for all my introvert friends out there who may not feel comfortable leaving your opinion in an internet comment section, I see you. Go ahead and leave me a good old bagel emoji this week, because who thought we would get the joy of talking about Bagelgate so soon? I really hadn't planned for it, so I'm glad that it's back. Let's celebrate with some bagels in the comment section. I love seeing your emojis just as much as I love reading the opinions, so I do hope that you'll leave them for me there. As always, thank you all so much for being here with me today. I will see you in the next one. Bye!